in education up to senior secondary level. We have operations in various countries, and Nigeria is included in one of them. Our flagship program, which is the Education Champions Network, is in Nigeria implementing. This is a project where we partner with local organizations here on ground. This is an organization where we partner with local organizations here on ground to ensure that they're able to continue their advocacy work, their programmatic work for just promoting girl-child education and addressing the hurdles and challenges that girls face in order to continue their education here in Nigeria. Before I start, I would like to recognize our champions that we have. We're very proud to be partnering with our champion organizations and our champions specifically. We have Ted, who's here in the audience from Center for Girls Education, CGE. We have Rotimi Olawale from Youth Hub Africa. He's also in the audience. Second cohort, we have Mr. Abubakar Askira, all the way from Borno, Hallmark Initiative, Holly. We have Kiki James, she's here right here from ACE Charity. We also have from our third cohort, Frances from Center LSD, she's back there also. We have Pamela Bodhi as well from Borno. Then we have Hamzi, he's here, Code, where we are right now. Then we have Ms. Buki Lees, Mr. Benjamin from Rohi, coming all the way from Borno, is to launch the research that Malala Fund was able to conduct with our partners here about the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic, what it did was it really exacerbated the education crisis in Nigeria, especially the issues that girls faced with continuing their education. There were distinct gendered impacts because of the pandemic. And so we all are aware that since March 2020, schools were closed because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And during the lockdown, so many children were out of school. Nigeria, before the school closures, had 13.2 million children out of school. But since the lockdown and the school closures, there were about 36 million children who were out of school, added to that number that we had before. So during the lockdown, Malala Fund, the Malala Fund Education Champions Network, our champions, this chapter, conducted a research on the impact of the pandemic on girls' education. So this is something that shows how girls were impacted nationwide in Nigeria, but we focused on Kaduna State as a focus state just to give an example of the type of things that girls are experiencing during the pandemic. And so this was, for us, we were able to see that girls experienced less access to educational resources during the school closures, an increase in domestic burdens, and different types of violence and abuse as well. So the report reveals so many different economic impacts that COVID-19 had on families. So with this report, we just hope that Nigeria can be able to use its findings to build back better. That's what we've been hearing a lot, build back better, build back stronger. As the schools have started reopening, we want this information to fuel what the Ministry of Education does, the states ministries as well, UBE, all the stakeholders who are involved in education, what they can do to make sure that girls are not left behind, further left behind. So my colleagues here will be discussing the research findings, explaining how we conducted the research and the methodology, and then we'll be open for different questions. Thank you.
And it was quite shocking. Most of us know what happened during COVID-19. Most of us know the negative impact it had on our education system, but this research really highlights the problems our Nigerian children are facing. 1 in 4 girls in Kaduna had no help with distance learning out of the survey that was from the survey that was conducted. However, 1 in 4 girls had no access to distant learning, but boys had access to private tutors. Fathers, we have to do better. That's not fair. That's really not fair. Over 90% of households in Kaduna had no financial assistance during the lockdown, and 77% of students within the survey in Kaduna spent less than 2 hours studying at home compared to 5 to 6 hours that they would get in school. Also, further findings highlighted that girls decided or cited that they didn't want to go back to school out of fear of the coronavirus, because unfortunately some of the schools were used as centers for coronavirus during the pandemic. The findings also suggest that students are reluctant to go back to school again, which is what I said earlier, because of fears of being exposed to the virus, just simply because some of the schools were used as isolation centers. I can't imagine any of your children here being told you have to go back to school knowing that that school was used as an isolation center. That was some of the findings that were key findings that were highlighted by the report. Thank you.
So as regards the methodology, we use 2 major approaches. One is the door-to-door survey method, and the second is the phone interview method. 26% of the respondents were interviewed through the door-to-door survey method, and then 74% of the respondents were interviewed through telephone survey method. You would notice that a higher percentage of the respondents were actually interviewed via telephone survey method, and this was just because of the Covid-19 lockdown. So in arriving at this report, we also reviewed government policies and then also relevant literature in arriving at this report. So at this point, I'll rest here and I'll hand over to my colleague, Munira, to take us through her field experience. Thank you.
In Borno, where I come from, we have low access to technology, even though there is a technology there, but the internet are expensive, and also we experience a lot of fluctuations. And in Borno, for instance, in IDP locations like IDP camps, most of the IDPs don't have these facilities that will enable girls education with regards to the distance learning programs. There is no televisions in the IDP camps. The radios that they have is not even sufficient to cover the number of girls that we have in that particular locations, which is going to bring a hindrance towards girl-child education in those particular societies. And also looking at economic stress, we have noticed a breakdown of economic activities in Borno, which had made a lot of families to be dependent on humanitarian and development support, which it is not going to be sufficient for those parents to send their girls to school. Due to the economic stress, there is no enough financial support to be able to cater for the girl-child needs in those particular locations. Even though the research was not able to cover sensitive issues like gender-based violence, early marriage, teenage pregnancy, in Borno, during the pandemic, we experienced an increase with regards to early marriage in communities like Dikwa, Bama, and Konduga. We experienced these kind of things, and also teenage pregnancies as well is also increased in those particular locations. And these particular girls have limited access to services with regards to catering for their needs, thus bringing a challenge with regards to girls' education as well. And also, during the pandemic, we also experienced increase in girl child stalking in Maiduguri, to be precise. There is an increase in order to tackle the issue of economic stress. So mostly the street hawking is mostly young girls, not boys. So the ratio is it's on the high side with regards to girls. And these issues also bring about challenges with regards to girl child education in Borno State. There's a few field experiences that I am able to share here. Thank you. Over to you, Hamzi.
It's quite shameful, but today I will take a bullet for them, and hopefully they will get the message, and after this, after our recommendation, they work closely with stakeholders and governments to address this crisis. Education data have shown that we are failing to invest in girls. But these findings could also be a turning point if we were able to use them as a game changer that Nigeria needs in the education sector. From this report, we've highlighted 4 important recommendations for government to follow through. The first is to provide distance learning, particularly to girls. State government needs to work with development partners like Malala Fund and her champion, and the State Universal Basic Education Board to scale up efforts in providing offline learning materials. These materials must include take-home packs and textbooks. The federal government should also review her Learn at Home program to be more adaptive to the needs of marginalized population of all kinds. So we call on the federal government to roll back all the cuts on education spending, both at the federal level and at the state level. And we want to see more commitment in maintaining increase in public spending through prioritizing education in the growth and recovery plan of COVID-19.